Hello, Patreon. Thank you for being here. I'm so grateful to you for supporting the work that I'm doing on Cocaine and Rhinestones. Everything's going great with scripting the second season, just writing as much as possible and getting this story that I've built in my head out into sentences that will hopefully put it all together for the world at large. Last month, I talked about how building a story and building a puzzle feel like similar processes to me. Part of that process for me, as far as the story goes, is trying to write in as conversational a tone as possible. I'd rather someone feel like they're reading a letter that I wrote to them than a book they were assigned in school. And the way that I talk, I've been told for most of my life, can come across as authoritative, which is not necessarily a bad thing as long as I'm certain I know what I'm talking about. A thing that's come up often so far in my writing for the season is that I don't realize how much the story I'm telling deviates away from accepted narratives or conventional wisdom on the subject until I see the facts as I understand them there on the screen in my own words. Every time it happens, it's like, oh, this is going to piss off a lot of people who think they already know the truth about this. As I've mentioned many times before, if the subject is country music, then nearly anything meaningful that you can say about it is going to make someone mad, no matter how you say it. This is something I knew to be true when I started working on the first season, and it caused me many sleepless nights stressing out over what I knew would be negative outspoken responses to things that I felt were much more true than what most people believe to be true on the subject. And the blowback from the Okie from Muskogee episode, for instance, was way worse than I even thought it was going to be. And that's fine. It's not anything that's ever going to stop me from doing this work that I have to do. But the anxiety is still there because I do want the truths that I've found to reach as many people as can open their minds to hear them. If someone out there does have misconceptions regarding that song or who deserves credit for creating the Bakersfield sound or the Nashville sound or what was really going on in the outlaw country movement, any of these things, if it's possible for the person with wrong ideas to give up those ideas when presented with new information, I would hate for the way that information is presented to be the reason it doesn't get to them. I could be guilty of this too. I can't tell you how many times I've been reading some book that was written a long time ago and the author lays down some definitive statement. This is the first type of song in this style. It's important to be careful when you're writing about the evolution of a musical style, a production technique, a method of playing a particular instrument. Prior to the internet, which is when most of these accounts were written, it had to have been pretty easy for someone to get an idea in their head, think they'd researched it exhaustively, and then start throwing around definitive but inaccurate statements in some book that goes on to be read by thousands of people who are never going to look into it themselves, And even knowing that, when I read one of those books and see someone call some song the first kind of song that did this or that, if I know about a song that came out 5 years before that song that sounds exactly like it, it gets difficult to just take everything else that person says at face value. But it also reminds me of several things. It reminds me that I've learned way more about country music than anything I ever thought I knew before I started working on this in just the few years that I've been working on this. It reminds me of the responsibility I have to correct as much of this history as I can, since I'm fortunate enough to live in a time that makes it so much easier to access so much more information. And it reminds me that 50 years from now, they'll have even better technology. So I better be careful to only write like I know for a fact what I'm talking about when I know for a fact what I'm talking about. Side note to that end, I had a friend come over a few days ago and help me build these shelves on a whole wall of my office. So now when I see the facts as I know them on the screen in my own words, which I know will make someone angry if they think I'm wrong ahead of time, I can just reach for the book instead of doing what I was doing before and digging through boxes and bags of books to try to find one specific book to fact check this thing, make sure I'm right, make sure I'm not overstating the truth or anything of that nature. And it's a minor thing, but those of you who've been watching these videos for a while have seen me trying different camera positions in this room. The lighting is not always great on them, and I feel like this will actually solve that problem too. I feel like the lighting is decent right here, and having this as a background doesn't let you see how much of a clusterfuck my office is while I'm in the middle of this process. As always, I hope this is at least somewhat interesting for those of you here on Patreon. It's usually strange for me to speak about writing in any depth beyond just saying, yeah, I'm writing, it's going very well. Always feels strange to me because it is simply a craft to my mind. There's the puzzle analogy. You could also look at it like building a chair. You take these parts, put it together, it's a chair, you can sit on it. What's to talk about? But this is where my head's at while I'm writing the second season, and I do want to try to share as much of that with you as I can. Like I said, hope it's interesting. Again, thank you for being here. I hope everyone has a good holiday season. If you're traveling, please be careful in your travels. Please be safe. And I'll see you here next month.